Good. Okay. Okay, welcome. So today on the Coach with Mendy podcast, we're inviting and we have a beautiful guest, Dr. Stephen Terrell, who is actually my teacher, which I graduated actually in 2022, the founder of Transforming Touch, living in Houston, Texas. And welcome.
Thank you. It's great
Hi.
to be here. I'm a little bit east of Houston. I'm actually in Pflugerville, which is a
Oh,
little
Pfluger.
over, but not very far.
Not very
Texas,
far.
Texas is massive, but I'm only about 3 hours from Houston.
Right, right. I mean, I'm familiar a little bit with Texas, the part of Dallas, which I used to travel a lot.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
years ago.
It's a
Okay,
whole different part. Yeah,
all different part. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah.
So I want to introduce and explain to our listeners,
hmm
first of all, your background. How did you start to get into, in general, to somatic work? Because a lot of clients don't even know what somatic is in general, and then we're going to be coming to that. Then some of them do, but they don't know what is transforming touch, and they keep on asking who created it, and then they keep on asking, is it like voodoo voodoo? Are you doing energy? That's the and or black magic? What's going on? So
Yes.
first of all, the background of in general, I know that a little bit. I know that you used to work together with Peter Levine, or maybe you can tell us better and
Yeah, I can. Let's go back a bit. How I got here, I was trained. I went to college. I have a degree in psychology. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a doctorate in psychology. And I have a master's degree in counseling. And so the reason this work kind of got there and happened was I was working through Child Protective Services, and I was working mostly with foster children, children that had been removed from the home for some reason and placed in foster care. And later that turned into adoptions, so working in adoptions. And on down the road, I ended up adopting two. Both of my sons are adopted. So it was interesting. At that time, I thought I understood trauma. I had already been trained in many children's like play therapy. I've been trained, I'd started some somatic trainings, later discovered Peter Levine's work in somatic experiencing, trained in that. Through that, met Kathy Kane, and through Kathy Kane, started doing more touch. The second year of somatic experiencing gets into touch. And so I thought, this is what's missing. This is what I need to take back to my practice is this touch component. And so came back and started working with touch. And through that process, I really um, became aware that it wasn't quite enough. It wasn't hitting the developmental trauma. The original SE was more focused around shock trauma, which there's a beginning, you have a life before, then something happens, interrupts your life, but you can get back to where it was before. And with developmental trauma, there is no before. So it's like there's no basis to go back to. So you're really creating something differently. And it's not wushu, it's all neurobiologically science based. It's about coming in and creating transforming touch, came out of it as a place where we could regulation focused, meaning that we focus on regulation instead of focusing on symptoms or diagnoses. We come in because we don't know which symptom is protecting or what symptom or which diagnosis. We don't really know where to go back to. So it made sense to come in and to focus on this regulation system, expanding somebody's window of tolerance where because of trauma it could get very narrow very quickly, and being able to come back around and look at it and say, okay, we're going to just focus on the autonomic nervous system. And what happens there is threat causes a sympathetic response, which is a high jump of energy that causes cortisol to be produced in our adrenals and dumped into our stomach, into our intestines that shuts us down, basically. And so we start getting all of these chemicals and all of these reactions, and really coming in to recreate a safe enough place that's predictable. And it has to have predictability for it to work. And that's what Transforming Touch does. It brings in the predictability. We do very measured movements. We're very clear. All of the places we're touching into are directly related to the threat response. And yeah, that's kind of where it came out of, was this of a huge need, a part of the population that I was working with that was not getting met at that same level. And then as it expanded, I realized, whoa, it's not just the adoptions, there's a whole lot of developmental trauma in all sorts of ways coming through. And it just expanded from there.
So, a few questions on what you're saying, which is amazing what you're saying. So, first of all, what intrigued you that you went to the SC program and you picked up on the touch that is the that's that's the item.
Well, the only thing that I can lean into is God. That's all I can lean into.
Wow.
God, I had seen Peter speak in Denver, Colorado at an EMDR conference, IMM desensitization and reprogramming. And I thought, oh, that would be a neat training to take. Maybe I'll take that training someday. And the day before it started, here in the part of Texas where I live, right outside of Austin, the day before is when I found out it was starting. And so I applied, got in, and started the next day, the training. And I kept going through it, and I thought all of it was interesting because I had not worked somatically at that level before. So there was a lot of interest, but really the touch part, so watching the regulation take place, understanding the relationship became more important. When I went through SC, somatic experiencing training, relationship wasn't near as important. Today, it's much more important. Back then, we just kind of sat there and said, what do you notice? And you worked from a much simpler, but not as effective with developmental trauma
Wow.
place. But today, it's much more nuanced than it used to be.
And how would you describe, first of all, for people then asking what is developmental trauma, or they might even be avoiding it. They're already adults today, and nothing is wrong with me. Like everything is fine. Everything is like today. I know I'm an entrepreneur. I'm doing everything, but they don't realize and basically they're in avoidance in a way.
Yeah,
And obviously their relationship at home or the relationship to the teens or later to the children or the children, that's how would
yeah.
you describe that?
I think, I mean, Mindy, I really believe that the older we get, the more relational we become.
Oh yeah.
And so that's where we start. If we're kind of teenagers, we kind of, they'll say parents or adults will say, oh, well, they're just teenagers. They'll go through that period of, that's just a period of development or something. And they look back at that. But as we get into marriages and dating or whatever, wherever we land in relationships, we blow up. It becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly that there's something not quite right. And the not quite right is our attachment. And we know that attachment itself, an attachment theory, where the avoidant lives and the ambivalent, the anxious live, and the disorganized, where all of those kinds of attachments come in, that they're there for survival. And if we're surviving that early on, the developmental trauma, we start looking at what happened during utero, during the pregnancy, what happened to the mother. And we go back 3 or 4 generations, we go upline, because we also know that epigenetically, everything that happened to your grandparents, your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, any trauma they may have had that they didn't resolve in their lifetime is coming right on down. And
Would
you're
you
going to,
call that as well developmental
yes,
trauma? I guess. So that's
yes,
the reason why we work with teens and children as well.
exactly, exactly. So we're hoping to change the trajectory of a generation. And we do that by coming in and building relationship, looking at it through the lens of attachment, the lens of safety. We're always coming back to safety.
Safety.
Safety is so huge in order for us to heal. And we don't heal alone. We heal in relationship.
And why is that?
Well, I think that we already had a chance to heal. We wouldn't have been affected if we would have,
Hmm.
if we'd have had, the
Okay.
opportunity to heal alone, we'd already be healed.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so it's just not happening. So we really come back to relational because with developmental trauma, the first part of our lives, we're totally dependent on a caretaker. Some adult has to change diapers, feed us, take care of us, everything. We can't do anything on our own. We're completely dependent. So if that relationship, for any reason, wasn't able to be as solid as we'd hope it to be, there we go. I mean, it's like we're already starting to tilt. Something's not quite right pretty early on.
And the interesting part is also that transforming touch can be used for so many different diagnoses. Let's be calling it diagnosis because that's the way we can talk about it.
Right.
And that's interesting because in other therapeutic models, so let it be in psychology, there's specialties for everything, if it's ADHD or if it's an addiction. And here we have, can you explain that to the audience? Because they're asking, how is this? Here it's for addiction, here it's for bedwetting, here it's
Yeah.
for and they don't get the concept. And I want them to understand from a maybe to dumb it down, what does regulation mean and how can like this. That's why they keep on asking me, are you making witchcraft or something? What's really going on? That
Yes.
everything is under one. Even now, not we're not saying that we can heal everything, but we definitely can make you more comfortable or more being with it.
Right. And I like that term, being with it. When we think about being with it, you know, we know there's people born without an arm. Eh, I haven't heard of anybody growing an arm. They can have an automatic prosthesis or something like that, but I don't really know of anyone who's grown an arm. Maybe they have, and I haven't heard the story. And I believe it's possible. I believe that it's totally possible for that to occur. But I believe that we learn to live with it. We learn to live with it. And the way we learn to live with it allows it not to have the same trigger power that it originally has. So, we start thinking about like bedwetting. If bedwetting's an upsetting and it's a big issue, then we look at that and we go, oh, wow, this is really causing a lot of pain in this family, causing a lot of pain in this child or this adult.
Shame, shame.
A lot of shame for sure. And so we start looking at it and we think, okay, what if we look at it from regulation? And regulation is like heartbeat. Our heartbeat is an example of regulation. Our breathing is an example of regulation. We know that there's, the heartbeat and the breath. We know all of that regulates together. We know that there's a relationship. Well, there's also the relationship to our autonomic nervous system, where the fight, flight, and freeze response live. And we know that the more trauma that we've experienced, that oftentimes that window of tolerance where our regulation, autonomic nervous system regulation can occur becomes narrow. And so we actually have more outside than we do inside. And outside is dysregulation. And dysregulation limits us and costs us because we have to figure out what do I have to do to bring this dysregulation into regulation. So I'm over here and I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, oh yeah, maybe if I drink alcohol, or maybe if I do drugs, or maybe if I act out sexually, or maybe if I yell and scream, or maybe if, the maybe if I's can go on and on and on and on. But those maybe if I's are keeping us safe. They're doing the job of the parasympathetic. Sympathetic rises with threat, parasympathetic calms it down. But when it's chronic, the parasympathetic doesn't work as it was designed. It becomes more dysfunctional, is in that parasympathetic part. So we want to just slow it down and look at it and go, okay, this is keeping us safe. But if I can increase the regulation, I can increase the window of tolerance, I won't need the symptoms. I won't need the diagnosis to stay safe. They may still be there, but they won't be active. They won't be directly interfering with my day to day life. My life will get much easier. I'll increase relationships. I'll increase my ability to learn, to grow physically, to heal physically. All of those things get better.
The question I always get asked, like people would come in with ADHD and they're looking at it that it's a brain function. It's a brain thing. They're asking me how in the world are you going to be touching my adrenals and touching my brainstem? Am I going to be able to control my thoughts and be organized? Can you shed some light onto that?
Well, thinking about ADHD, what we can do is through safety and relationship and regulation, we can really come in and go, first of all, let's own the ADHD. Let's own it. Let's make it, okay, this is why I do what I do. Once you figure out that, you're way on down the road because then you start with building up this regulation. You won't need so much ADHD. It'll lessen in quantity. Whether it'll completely disappear, some people's do, some people's don't. We know that, some people can heal, some people don't heal in the same way. I think the ones who don't heal in the same way usually there's more of a stacked load of trauma. And we look at that allostatic load, which we call the cost of doing business. And we think about how much effort it takes for me to have a sense of safety, to be safe. It can cost a lot. It can cost us more than 50% of our daily allotment of energy, of life force. It limits our ability to be in relationship even with God. It's limited when we're trying to survive. Can really.
And I also think, if I remember you saying me once that you have a background in other modalities, for example, craniosacral and different things, but you still chose transforming touch as.
Yes. Yes. And I have had some craniosacral classes, but the majority of my background was all psychology. I worked in play therapy with kids and I worked in reality therapy, IMM desensitization and reprogramming, brain spotting, IFS, those going in those directions. More traditional psychology, more going to see a counselor and working through talk therapy. Basically, I was a talk therapist exclusively until I wasn't. And it all kind of happened in one day. And when I started doing touch in Texas, there were all sorts of rumors. Oh, it's against the law. Therapists can't touch. Oh, you can't do this. You can't be touching people. And I still hear that. I still hear that. And it isn't
Mhm.
true. It isn't true. We do touch. We do touch. Touch
Yeah,
goes all the way back to the beginning of time. There was touch.
right, right. Meaning it's definitely, and we see the healing, so that's we see the healing in it, so it's
Yes.
definitely. And I just will want to underline, like it's a safe touch,
Yes.
that's what's.
Very. Yeah, and it's a predictable. It's like I'm going to ask your permission and get your okay before we ever get started. I'm not going to just all of a sudden go, okay, here we go. I'm going to ask your permission. And once you give me permission, and then I'm going to start, but not until I have a clear permission from you. And the touch, the 7 point part of transforming touch never changes. It's always the same points.
Right.
We move through the same points every time.
How could you explain scientifically to people that don't know to say, how does touch heal? They have no clue about somatic. They have no clue about transforming touch. They have nothing. They know they heard about talk therapy because it's going on already since Freud, but
Right.
this is something. How would you just scientifically, or I don't know, make them understand, dumbing it down for them to yes.
Well, dumbing it down to the lowest degree would be to say,
I can just say one note. I know you like to hear sometimes Torah, right? And we
yes,
talked about Hashem. I when I was learning, I learned with my partner. Where I have a partner I learned with him many years. Every day we have an hour that we learn. So there's one of the books which was written over 1,000 years ago, and he talks about first of all he wants to introduce God in what is the bigness in the godliness, the big part what God created in the world, and he keeps on saying how God created the world and all the greatness that seeing that this is God. One of the things that he keeps on, what he says over there, and I told my partner, you don't know what he's saying because they're not here to tell you therapy. They're talking about the world. One of the things that he and I usually stop at things that are therapeutic in the Torah, which I pick up right away. He says one of the things is he put in the science of touch.
mm,
And you can say, okay, touch, but I told no, this is much deeper because they talk very short because they want to get to a point. I says, wow, that really got me. That's it's a very a famous book. It's called in Hebrew the Chovos, meaning the desires of the heart, and it's written over 1,000 years ago, and he lived in obviously in the Middle East, and it was actually written the first time it was written in Arabic, and then it was translated into Hebrew.
oh wow,
Yeah, and he only spoke Arabic. Was a big sage, and he one of the things he keeps on he mentions that says, "Whoa, this is mind-boggling to me." This was like this was something that
yeah,
really
for sure. And I was just going to go to the very basic thing that you think about little bitty kids, little toddlers, and
yeah.
little kids, and they bang their finger, or they get hurt, and mommy's or your daddy's blow on it and kiss it. That's
And
touch.
then that's touch.
That's the earliest touch that's telling our system, and we know from studies that have been done on that it works, that it will reduce the significance of the pain. It was
You said one thing.
significantly reduced. So yeah,
But what I
absolutely.
but I'm also seeing when a baby is born, first of all, it's in a sack, so it's also surrounded with water, so it's already taken care of. Then when it's born, it's like to be in that cozy blanket, and it grows from that, and that's what nourishes the baby. So I guess we still have all of us a baby within us, and
Yes.
that inner child we're trying to. I guess that makes sense scientifically as well to
Uh,
understand.
exactly correct.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
The nurturing is so important. And if you didn't get nurturing,
Right.
you don't know what to do when you do
And
get
it
it.
doesn't matter how old you are. You can be 40, 50, 60, or 30. Doesn't like
Yeah.
sometimes you're
Age doesn't
speaking to
matter.
adults and it says you're like the macho guy. You're gonna touch me. You think that's gonna heal me? Like the common macho, macho. I said, well, let's try that. Let's see. Let's be curious. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
especially where there's communities, especially in our communities, there's certain communities where, in general, some touch is more hidden and more there. So we're trying to understand, to make it more awareness in general. I always tell parents, make sure you hug your children, make sure you take care of them.
Yes.
They should know your touch, not someone else's touch. That.
Well, there's so many, from our standpoint, men working with men, and they have that big macho, like, oh, I'm not going, this is not for me, that kind of, and it's kind of funny because what we're doing is that's where we had the least amount of our touch probably growing up was from our fathers. They
Yeah.
they didn't touch us. They were busy trying to make a living, trying to do,
Right.
these other things, and now we're coming in, we're healing, which should have already always been there, but it wasn't. So we're coming in, we're bringing in healing around a new pattern, a new way of living, which creates new patterns. And patterns Our old patterns, we get exactly what we expect to get. From our experience says, if my experience says, if you touch me, you're going to touch me inappropriately. If that's my experience, that's what I expect. And when you don't, there's a struggle in the system. Sometimes it'll get worse for a little bit and then it gets better. There's a struggle. And then through that struggle, all of a sudden it goes, oh, wait a minute. This is new. This is safe. I could live with this. And all these patterns begin to change. And one pattern never changes alone. There's multiple patterns changing at the same time in our nervous systems.
What is your experience when you have a client that is basically you, the first time, the second time, they're totally not in touch with their emotions, not in touch. No, they got onto the table because, okay, they're skeptical. And then you ask them after how the session was. I don't know. I don't know. And yes, I know they're going to come back a second time, but sometimes they want to hear something from you. So ask them, I try to pinpoint it to them. Are you calmer from the minute that you walked in or not? Just let's be aware. Yeah, maybe, maybe, but I'm still not healed. The ones that are active, I'm still not healed. I know that. I know so they're anxious. They want to be healed yesterday. And we all want to be healed yesterday in order to make them aware. That means also the activation and it's definitely that. But I also
What
realized,
happened? I wonder what would happen, Mindy, if we just said, how would you know if you were healed?
that's a good
Uh,
one. How would you know if you're healed?
yeah. How
Yeah.
do you know it didn't work? What's telling you that information?
Hmm.
Where are you getting that information? Because that's your experience is nothing works. Your experience is nothing works. So you are now acting it out. You're now proving to yourself that this didn't work. Well, what if it worked so quietly and so subtly that you didn't even know it was happening? You're so guarded, you didn't even know this happened. What
You're
would
saying
that
something
be like?
that's, and you're saying something also very deep. Actually, it's also a Kabbalistic aspect of we know as when God created the world, there was first some call it the Big Bang, but there was like the breaking of the vessels.
Right.
Before the breaking of the vessels, it was totally quiet. It was quietness. That's so so in order to create the world, he had to break the vessels a little bit but there is still a space of quietness. So some souls come from a quiet place, and some souls come from that breaking of the vessels, and they just cannot connect to that quietness. And some are looking for that quietness, but they're in the chaos, and that's exactly what I can see in the practice. And by doing that, how that helps
Yeah.
of bringing in.
That's funny. I didn't know the part about the quietness and the breaking of the vessels. I didn't
Right.
understand that completely, but I always thought, forever, I thought that we had to come from a place of quiet. But only in the last 12 to 18 months, probably, I've become aware that some people do heal in the noise. Some people
Yes.
will heal in the noise and they can't get to the quiet no matter what we do. We're not going to get them to
Right.
the
Right.
quiet.
Yeah. So there's these sessions that I was asked if I can listen to music, and I remember we spoke about it once. So putting in some sort of music in order to that, yeah, very few, but that's then the interesting thing also when we see people coming onto the table, some of them can get extremely activated right away. Some of them get emotional right away. Some of them quiet. Some of
Right.
them nothing, like, okay, it's like just like it was in the sauna, that type of. How do you explain that?
Well, the only way we can explain it is where they are in their own life. What are they doing in their own life right now? Some people are on the edge to where they might start showing physical complaints or physical reactions immediately. Some people are on the edge emotionally. Some people are so far away from the edge, they may never get to the edge. We may just have to, stay with them where they are. And understanding that we don't know. If we knew, that would be a pattern. But we don't know what you're going to show up with, and you're showing up
Right.
unique, and I need to be prepared to see you uniquely. I don't need for you to come into my mold for me to work with you. I need to allow you to be whoever you are at that moment, whatever shows up. And, the most difficult is the one where they say, oh, nothing's happening, nothing happening.
Yeah.
And being able to come back and say, yeah, but, I noticed when you first laid on the table, there were some movements. And over time, those movements have shifted. They seem to have gone away. They've gone quiet. They don't seem to be there. And I just wonder if you're noticing little tiny movements at other places in your life. I just wonder. And
Uh,
teaching clients, being able to allow them the space to discover that, oh, yeah, I am so busy trying to stay safe and alive and to survive that I'm not even noticing the sound of a bird singing outside. I'm trying to rush, 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 rush. I don't notice what grass feels like growing under my feet. I don't notice these things because I'm trying to survive. And when we're so targeted on survival, we're not going to notice until one day, out of nowhere, we're going to announce, something is different. I don't know how I got there, but today something's different in my life.
so I can, like I said, the most difficult client is when they're skeptical and they're still in the same process. And then the next question is, well, they're going to ask you, how long am I supposed to be doing this? So the ones that don't just want to try 2, 3 sessions, I feel so bad because they're not going to be healing. And I ask them, if you have a different alternative, by all means, do it. But they keep on asking, says, I can't give you the date, but I can just tell you from my experience, and you have a lot more experience. You've done probably 40, 50,000
At
sessions
least, at
at
least.
least. What would you say, like time frame, you know, especially the ones that are skeptical and they want to finish 1, 2, 3.
Well, the I don't know if this is a simple answer or a difficult answer, but I would say, Mindy, have you ever prayed for something?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, in other words, and that's a big component. You got to bring your spirituality into
Yes.
sessions, and
Yes.
God is in the session, and spirituality into your life, which is, I'm a
Yes.
big fan of that, and I try to do that in a very safe way. Everybody
Yes.
quoting, because I do have all types, especially
Yes.
from our community. And the thing where they feel comfortable is because there's no judgment. So if there's
Yeah.
no judgment, then and I really understand why they're doing that. Because when you understand developmental trauma, I understand irregulated and no. So by all means, and I keep on telling them, God wants you. The first thing is to be healthy. Once you'll
Right.
be healthy, then we can continue further. That's the first component. And
Right. And then,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
And so, God doesn't tell us how long it's going to take.
right,
We don't know. I would be lying to someone if I said I knew exactly what moment in time your life was going to change.
right,
What I am willing to do is stay curious about it each time I see you, to be curious about where you are this time. And for some people, a few sessions is all it took. And for
right,
some, it seems to like it takes ongoing, maybe 10 years, who knows?
right.
Maybe some people just heal at a different rate and they have a lot more things that they're working on. And so I don't know. I always say, if it were energy work, if I were doing some sort of woo woo, I could tell you because I would make something up. But I'm not doing woo woo. I'm actually coming in to reset a nervous system through touch and safety and relationship. All of that happens. And I'm not coming in to do something that you're not willing to do.
Can you tell us an inspiring, impactful story from a client without the name, obviously, but really that can impact and inspire people
Oh,
listening?
oh, that's an interesting question. Every day I hear a story about somebody's life who has changed. Um, Probably, I'm thinking of some different ones. I it was a physiological. Someone had been diagnosed with a pretty severe diagnosis, and through the regulation, they had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And through regulation, their need for medication really reduced almost down to no medication at all. The medication began to work better, even though there was neurological issues that were partial to cause. Their life got so much better. Their life got much easier. I see people whose kids scream and yell and fight and kick and bite and hit and do everything under the sun. I hear and I've witnessed many children not being destructive towards others or themselves anymore. I've heard stories of people being able to stand up for themselves who've never stood up for themselves, to be able to get jobs, careers that were more meaningful in their life, people who were able to forgive, people who were able to say, my parents did the best they could, or my father did the best he could, or my mother did the best she could. To be able to get there without that level of anger, that level of frustration. Kids being able to learn in school, kids being able to get to school, learning how to agree instead of disagree with a child. I'm really frustrated. Yeah, you are frustrated. Not, oh, no, you're not frustrated. Or this is how frustrated, staying away from that, being able to be with your child, being able to be with them wherever they are. And through that experience, the more regulation you have is the more regulation your child has, which gives
Yeah.
your child more opportunities to heal before they ever even start the treatment, before they even come in the first time.
Would you
And
say that you have an average, but in all these cases, how many sessions they've done? Just an average?
I would say 6 months of weekly is
Hmm.
probably the average
6 months
for
a week.
their 6 months to a year. I would probably go with that weekly because we
Mhm.
do bring in some primitive reflexes such as fear paralysis and moral
Right.
and some of these. And if those are not integrated, it could take a bit longer. But for some, those integrated. And so we're going right into um, the regulation of the whole system, which means it may take less time.
If someone is feeling regulated and like it doesn't have really a reason for to test, but it says, I'm curious, is there a benefit to a person just he feels everything is fine, is more or less regulated person. Does he have a benefit from a session in transforming touch?
Yes, yes. We can all benefit from more regulation or less work on our regulation. Even if we have a perfect system, it can get better. It can get better. So,
Right.
yeah, those people don't normally show up very often. In my
Right.
office, they don't. Usually,
Right.
I get really critical folks showing up, but it'd be nice. It'd be nice if they would. I'd be,
Yeah, no, there's actually one particular client that I do have
yeah,
that it's fine. He did a lot of different types of work, and he is saying, first of all, he gets a nap sometimes on the table, so that's good for him.
yes, yes,
But so that by itself, but he's saying, I'm not sure yet what it's doing to me. That's
yeah,
that's like, it's fine, you know. It's interesting, that's what I was wondering. So people say, well, can I benefit from it? I say, yes, there is a benefit. It's not.
yeah, yeah, because, you know, how will I benefit? Well, the reason you're asking that question tells me that something isn't quite right in your life.
Hmm.
What's off in your life? And maybe we could get more specific, bringing it back around and saying,
That's a good one.
yeah, there's a reason. Why are you doing all these therapies if everything's okay? Why are
Yeah,
you falling asleep?
right.
Even falling asleep, we know people fall asleep in regulation, but we also know they fall asleep when they're avoiding. So why
Right.
is he falling asleep? We don't know, but he's falling asleep. So there's a light going off that, okay, pay attention. Something could come to the surface that he didn't even know was there. Because we're not looking for anything in specific, we're allowing space for everything to come to the surface.
Now, I also know that you're working with, across the world, many different cultures. Is there differences that you're seeing in the cultures itself, as far as the healing and as far as the trauma, or how they respond to trauma, or it's more or less all in the same? They're all God's people and have more or less the same, I guess. I know that one culture has the Holocaust, the other one has poverty, and the other one, but it affects them more or less the same way.
Yeah, yeah. I don't see, you know, differences that we might notice would be how someone might be dressed one way or another
Right.
differently than somebody else, but that's not nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
But
because
when it
the
comes
system
to,
is
yeah, the trauma, no. I think the most research has been done on the Holocaust survivors. By far, epigenetic, looking at, trauma that goes from generation to generation, has been the Holocaust trauma, has by far the most research. Nothing
going
even comes
epigenetic,
close.
right?
Yeah, nothing comes close. So we
So,
have more, we know that we're going to affect it quicker,
right,
obviously. But all trauma, there's no trauma that's good trauma. We don't have good trauma.
right. No,
No. And we don't
definitely.
know, somebody could have lived through the Holocaust and they're living life pretty effortless. They've kind of figured it all out way before they ever got to us, that life is good. Where somebody else might have been in a car that got bumped in the rear end bumped it, and their whole life is a mess. So we don't always, you can't say, oh, because of this. It's more about what are they reporting? What do they self report? How's their life and their own self report? So, no, can't judge, can't say,
Mm,
well,
yeah,
this person or this person because of that. No, everybody's the same. We all bleed the same.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's a good. We all believe the same,
yeah,
and that's what it is. Wow. And
yeah,
and generational trauma is huge. Meaning we don't even realize that we're taking that over into generations. And so basically, we can say if you're a Holocaust grandchild or great grandchild, you can use the method
exactly,
in order to not to give it over to your children.
exactly.
Yes, that's beautiful. Is there any future new visions that you're coming out with in the
I always listen, and
so
I'm
that's
not done listening. And
that just comes in, or like it pops in and then you
it
take it to
comes
the
in,
next
and
one.
I try it out. And if it came from them, if I'm listening correctly to Source, to God, then it works.
How do you can you teach us how to listen?
Yeah. One of the ways is sit in silence, sit quietly as best you can. Maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes. I don't know. Sit quietly and listen. The first voice you're going to hear is your own ego. You'll hear yourself. But if you listen in that silence, and it may take a while, you'll start hearing another voice. And that other voice is almost always God talking to us. I think God talks to us all every day. It's just that a lot
Just
of people aren't listening.
not listening, or they don't trust themselves,
Exactly.
and that's we need to build up trust. Here we go again. Here we go. We need to build up trust.
That's exactly
Wow.
correct, Mindy.
And we see how much spirituality is connected to this type of work and where it takes you. And we are spiritual beings. And if we don't acknowledge that, then there's still going to be chaos in your system.
Always, always.
Always.
There's always chaos in the system.
The system. Wow,
Yeah.
wow, wow. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow. I'm really happy to hear all this and to share it to the world and share it to the communities. And where can people contact you? What's the best way? I guess, is it the website?
The website, probably transformingtouch.com,
Transformingtouch.com.
or they can email me at steve@transformingtouch.com.
Touch.com.
It'll come to me.
Okay. So I'll share something else also, which I connected. It was amazing for me to hear from a psychologist that I did a supervision group, and coming from the side of psychology, which you know what psychology is, and you know that, and he's still a psychologist and a PhD and a doctorate, and I, have a lot of supervision with him as well. And I asked him, and he's also, he's already many years, in the line, and he was in Ohio, and he was in New York, and he was in different places and all different colleges, and he's really a doctorate. And I asked him, can you tell me what is the best model of therapy that heals? He says, he answers me, it's the therapist, it's not the model.
Always.
And that coming from a psychologist, that might, here we go, relationship. And says, "Whoa, I need to share this with Stephen,
Yes,
Dr. This is what you learn in somatic work, and you understand it." And it came
yes.
from his side and says, "No, it's not about the model; it's about the therapist,
It's the relationship with the therapist.
relationship." Yeah,
Always the relationship. We
amazing,
come back to the relationship.
great, great,
Always.
great. So I want to thank you, and we'll put out it's transformingtouch.com, and Stephen Terrell. Thank you so much,
And
and
good Shabbos to you
good
today. And
Shabbos, and Hashem should help you to keep on going for many, many years with health and strength, because your light is shining up the world, not only all the communities, because we are here to heal the world, to help people in order to see the shine of the light of God. That's what we're here for. No
thank
fights. Thank you so
you. Thank
much.
you. Baruch
Great.
Hashem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.